This is the application. Okay, we'll call meeting to order. Ethan, if you could do a roll call, please.
Jeff Swearingen. Present. Patrick Updike.
Present on the phone.
Jeff Sunholm.
Present.
Marty Smith.
Present on the phone.
Tom Lampy.
Present.
John Benson. Bob Von Wolfrat.
Present on the phone.
Denise Pavlik.
Present.
Andy Buffington.
Present on the phone.
Ellen Hagan.
Present.
Deb Krebel.
Present on the phone.
Dave Ness.
Here.
Jason Leonard. Rob Rotter.
Here.
Mike Casper. Carol Lund Smith.
On the phone.
Larry Smith.
Present.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth. Got 14, got a quorum.
Thank you. If I could introduction of board members. Jeff, you would start from this end, please.
Jeff Sunholm, Iowa DOT.
Denise Pavlik, Scott Emergency Communication Center.
Ellen Hagan, Joe Fire and Rescue, representing volunteer firefighters.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, representing small SOs.
Chris Myers on the SWIC for Isicsb.
Tom Lampy, DPS.
Larry Smith, Kika County Emergency Management.
Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
And Dave Nast to my place.
Those on the phone, starting with Patrick.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Andy Buffington with Winnebago and Hancock County Communications, representing communication centers.
Deb Crable, representing the Iowa Professional Firefighters and the Fire Chiefs.
Carol Lund Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Bob Von Wolfrat, State CIO.
Melvin Mercado, Motorola.
Okay, that concludes the board member introductions. Welcome everybody for the board meeting today. Hopefully you have a quick meeting. We have some applications to approve at the end of the meeting. But I'm looking for the approval of today's agenda. I'll have one correction to it, or an addition, I should say. Jeff Peter-Zellick from the AG's office is here today. I'd like to get him in and out of here as fast as we can. It'll take about 5 or 6 minutes of our time. He's going to explain some rules. I'd like to insert him just before the SWIC report, if that's okay. So looking for the approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
Okay, Dave. Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm looking for the approval of meeting minutes from July 17th, 2017.
So moved.
Mr. Swearingen? Second by Jeff. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we'll go, Jeff, you can come up.
Thank you, Board. Jeff Peter-Zellick, Iowa Attorney General's Office. Some of you folks I know, and some of the folks on the phone I know, a lot of you I don't, which is one of the reasons I'm here. seems like every year or two I show up and when there's a bunch of new board members and give my little spiel, and then you don't see me for a year or two, which is a good thing because there are a number of boards and commissions within state government where literally there has to be legal counsel at every meeting in order to make sure everything's done correctly. You folks are the least needy board that I think I've ever had any association with, which I think is a real testament to the folks that have been involved over the years. Especially, I think you have, 19 members and then some non-voting members under Chapter 80, a large group of people. And really the only thing that I want to talk to you about is you have your own individual duties and jobs in addition to being on this board. You have the sheriff's office representatives from maybe a smaller county in Iowa. You have small municipalities and volunteer fire departments, things like that, which is all fine and good. You bring that with you, you bring that experience with you, and that's the reason why you're on the board. But when you're on this board, your duties are to the board and to the citizens of the state of Iowa. And if there's ever a situation where those duties on the board and those duties to the state of Iowa as a whole might conflict with your duty as a sheriff in a certain county or with a volunteer fire department, that's a situation where you really need to consider whether you should be involved in taking board action. And that's really the most important thing that I want to talk to you about today is just being sure that you avoid any conflicts of interest, that you avoid any situations where your duties as a board member might conflict with your duties as a sheriff or a volunteer firefighter or as an officer with the DNR or something like that. Everybody has their own agenda with respect to their agencies that they actually get paid from, but you do have to be careful not to let that interfere with your duties as a board member. What I've done is when we do have new board members and new commission members, a lot of times we either have a meeting where we kind of go through and explain what the role of a board member or a commission member is. And we also have a little handout, which I brought with me today. It's kind of a legal overview for new board members and commission members. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave those up here for any board members that want to grab one. And it's a really informative little packet. It has information in it about open records, open meetings, also has information in it about conflicts of interest, things like that. I'm just going to leave that up here with you for you to review at your convenience. You don't need to have me sit up here for the next half hour going through every one of those things. Anytime that any of you have a question, you're free to contact me, give me a call. Happy to try to help out any way I can. Usually most of those questions and issues get funneled through Tom, who's the person that I generally have contact with, and you can continue to do that, or you can contact me directly. I'm just fine. If you're mad at Tom and don't want to talk to him, just go ahead and give me a call, and we can deal with that as well. I don't know that I have really anything else to talk about unless Tom or anybody else thinks I should address something. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm going to leave these pamphlets up here for you guys to take a look at. And again, if you need anything, let me know. Great to see you. If you ever want me to come more often than once every 1 or 2 years, let me know and I can do that too. But so far this has worked out really well, and I appreciate that, and good luck to you, especially you new board members. And if you need anything, just give me a call.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move right along to the SWIC report. Mr. Myers.
All right, thank you, Chair Lappy. Quick update on a couple of things regarding the skip. Arlene Torres from the Office of Emergency Communications is wrapping up some work on the skip with her team. And as of a few days ago, she needed to touch base with the user group committee, the finance committee, and then also members of the newly formed and proposed security committee about their action plans. And assuming that gets taken care of this or next week, I think we'll have our document in our hands the following week or that thereafter. That'll be nice because we may actually have this thing in our hands before the October board meeting if everything goes well. So I'm very pleased with that progress. As far as the security committee is concerned, I do have a handful of individuals that I'm reaching out to on that. I would like to get their input on what the action plan should be for the security committee and how to achieve their goals and mission. So moving on from that, since the State Fair is here also, I will be at the State Fair next Friday at the interoperability booth in the Hall of Law. If you have any questions about interoperability, I'll be getting my fill of the State Fair rather. So if you want to come by and say hi, feel free to do so. On to some of the more meaty items. I've been following up a lot with the ISSI the past month, probably devoted about 20 some hours to it. This involves research through standards, reaching out to other states that have used it, other municipalities that have used it to find out what their experiences have been. There were a few states that were sent to me by stakeholders as well, and I made sure that I followed up with them as best I could. And I'll start off with Colorado. Within the Denver metro area, they have 3 ISSIs that bridge 3 unique networks together. There's a Motorola network, there's an Airbus network, there's a Harris network, and I think there's another Motorola network. And they have the ISSI setups to bridge them all. Everything is housed within one radio shop in the middle of the Denver metro. And in that radio shop, there are 2 full-time technicians that are there all the time. In total, they have 13 shops, and they have 46 full-time employees dedicated to radios. Now, a handful of those are at an administrative level, but you would have to say that they have anywhere from 38 to 42 full-time employees that actively work on radios and infrastructure and everything associated with that. One comment that came forth from talking to them was that it took a substantial amount of time of engineering, design, procurement, deployment, governance debates, and then eventually drafting SOPs to get this stuff running. It took a long time, and they're still working on a few things. The comment for them was that their ISSI only works in the area that is smaller. So in terms of the Denver metro, once the users on that network, whether it's the Airbus, Harris, Motorola, or the other Motorola network, go outside of that metro area, which is 10 counties, they have to manually switch their radios to the state system if they want to have service. So that seems a little bit odd, but that is what their experience is reported. They also have issues with both systems being overloaded during big events, because if you're using one system on one side to get to the other side, you're using resources on both sides. And they've commented that they've had issues with overloading during large storms or large-scale emergency events because of the way the resources are managed through the ISSI. They have also noticed that sometimes there's eavesdropping from interested parties across the state as to what's going on, so that also contributes to that. They mentioned that there are limited things that are technically a P25 standard that also make it through an ISSI. The man down button, for instance, is not universally patched through an ISSI. I asked them about our situation and explained how the statewide radio network is going to look when it's done. And they said that if we tried to do in what we're doing here, it would be prohibitively expensive as far as capital costs and FTEs are concerned. So that's something we have to consider. Another one was Nebraska. This was pointed out to me in that a vendor has some documentation about an ISSI being deployed in Nebraska, and I called up one of their radio people, and they said, yeah, we have one, it's in the shop, but it hasn't been deployed yet. They've spent over a year trying to get it connected, and they're still in the process of trying to get it connected, and they don't think that they'll honestly have it done by the end of this calendar year. And that's with only connecting one core. And mind you, Isicsb has 3 cores that can run the network independently. So in order to get something like this off the ground, we would probably have to have an ISSI connected to each core, because you never know which core is going to be running the network at any one given time. The next one that I followed up on was Missouri and Kansas City, and this was pointed out to me by another stakeholder. This is an example of where an ISSI does work okay. Both systems are of the same vendor, so it's vendor A to vendor A. So at some point you have to question if there's some special vendor sauce in the middle of this, because they were able to edit with a text editor the tables that the ISSI uses to manage users. And I don't know if you could necessarily do that if you were going vendor A to vendor B through the ISSI. That could potentially pose some problems. The other thing that they were alarmed with was the fact that the ISSI, for the users going from side A to side B, the users on side A can see everything as far as talk groups on side B and vice versa. So side A can see everything side B has, side B can see everything side A has. And you end up with a scenario where you could have something like a utility company that's on the state radio network that would be able to see exactly what talk groups are associated with something like the governor's detail, special political season talk groups, those types of details. So there's some security concerns with that. If they know those talk groups exist, that's one thing. Accessing them is another. I freely acknowledge that, but at the same time, some things better left out of being in the open. They had considerable growing pains with automatic roaming and orphaned radios. They also found out that with mobile units, automatic roaming doesn't work anyways. As far as Iowa's contract goes, automatic roaming is not in the contract, so that's not something we have to necessarily worry about, but it is something that kind of lends itself to how well the system actually works when it's live. They commented on the usage of resources, and that's been a problem also, as they've also had issues with overloading the system. And it's gotten to the point where if they're in a pursuit, only one car is allowed to use the ISSI to access another network. All the other cars that are on the chase at some point, they are patched manually at the dispatch level through a control station to talk to the other network. So they've had to enact some very strict user policies to prevent system overloading from occurring. And this is with a vendor A to vendor A type scenario. So that's not exactly something as a board that's conducive to interoperability. So the other thing that they noted is that they are looking at encryption also as a state, and they have found out that managing encryption through an ISSI is incredibly difficult, especially when it comes to key distribution and management, because the ISSI will not allow for OTAR to occur. So if we had, in theory, an encrypted talk group in Iowa on the Isicsb platform, and we had users from another radio system using that talk group, we could not send an updated key out over the air because the ISSI system would block that for the users on the other side of it. So that's a problem. And they said that using control stations may not be the ideal scenario as far as, you know, the whiz-bang side of it, but it makes managing things like encryption and patching through and controlling resources a lot easier. Moving on from that, they also commented about the control stations they have in every PSAP, and they said they work very well. That was about where the conversation ended there as far as that side of it goes. Have been actively working with the technology committee and kind of sorting through all the information we have about the ISSI and how it would be used. And the committee, and Patrick will touch on this in a little bit, the committee more or less understands the nuances and issues associated with the ISSI, and Patrick will give his recommendation on that later today. We also went over the staff study done by Swick Allen and CIO von Wolfrat about the ISSI, and all that will be talked about a little bit later this meeting. One thing I do want to note as well for the ISSI, and this is something that I had reaffirmed 2 days ago, is that there is no testing program for the ISSI through the P25 standards, and that's called the Compliance Assessment Program, or CAP for short. They have no labs, they have no protocol for testing the ISSI for compatibility across the vendor landscape. So at that point, you're left with the question on the ISSI is that if someone tells you it's going to work, you have to take it at face value from the vendor. There's no certified documentation saying something like this would actually work. We can try to hang some wheels on it and put some duct tape on it to fix it up in spots is more or less what I got from talking to states, but there's no guarantee that it's going to work the way you want it to. So given these examples, and after talking with the technology committee and debating some issues and hashing them out, my conclusion mirrors that of Swick Allen and CIO Bob von Wolfrat, that the ISSI, we should probably wait until the standards are more rigorously updated to reflect our needs in Iowa and to make sure it works, especially with the testing program. Setting up a CAP program is expensive, but again, it's nice to know that if you take something like that and spend a considerable amount of money on it, that when you plug it in, it's going to work. So as the SWIC, I have come up with 4 wish list items that I would like to see out of the ISSI, and these are my thoughts on it, and I would recommend shying away from it until these are met. The needed parties, APIC, FPIC, TIA, TR8, and the P25 steering committees all need to have regularly and hopefully expedited and accelerated meetings to come up with standards that are going to work and a testing program so that we know that this thing will work. That is sorely lacking at this point. And then once they have those set up, I want to see a process set up so that when they talk to public safety users and concerns with it and its functionality are brought forth, that they're dealt with appropriately. Because you got to remember, the radio is their lifeline when they're in the field. So if that doesn't work, that's a problem. I also want to see something done with the user loading issue, in particularly when you have an FDMA system talking through the ISSI to a TDMA system. Right now, the way it's set up is that if you have that in play, that FDMA system takes up twice the resources on the side of the TDMA because there's no type of compression there. So what I want to see is a compression scheme developed within the ISSI that'll take that FDMA transmission that takes up a whole channel and compress it down so it only takes up half the channel on the TDMA side, like a standard TDMA to TDMA transmission would do. That would cut down on the system loading tremendously. I also want to see for execution of all standardized P25 transmissions being allowed through the ISSI, such as the man down button, OTAR, things like that. They all need to be seamlessly integrated through the ISSI. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is develop and implement a CAP program so that functionality can be verified. And until that's in place, I can't recommend that we use the ISSI. Moving on to encryption, going from one meaty topic to another. We've been participating in a lot of committee meetings this month. I've been also in touch with Chair Updike on updating some old policy and how to proceed with that. At larger scale, as far as encryption goes on the Isicsb platform, I have been working on assembling a group of people to investigate the use of encrypted interoperable talk groups, whether or not it's reasonable to do that, and if it is reasonable to do that, how we would execute it. And I would like still to have 2 representatives from the emergency management community, one small and one large county preferably on the list, and I will be reaching out to a few more in the next week or so. I have an invitation out to Chair Buffington as well. At this point, the team consists of Dave Britton from DPS, he's one of the radio technicians, Robert Carruthers from the Des Moines Police Department, and thank you, Captain Ness, for recommending him. Fire Chief Greg Chia from Indianola, Rob Dennert from Westcom, Lieutenant Josh Hale from the Iowa State University Police Department. I think for something like this, it's important to include university police in the discussion as well, since they have a very unique set of needs. Lieutenant Mike Casper from Lynn County, Rhonda McKibben, who is in DPS as a supervisor, and she has a lot of dispatch experience. Captain David Ness himself. Scott Richardson, who's another radio technician within DPS. Sheriff Rob Rotter, who is sitting next to me. Glenn Sedevy from the Sioux City area. Chair Patrick Updike as well. And then also Captain Curtis Walzer from the Cedar Rapids Fire Department. I think we've assembled a very good team, and I think we'll be able to figure this thing out. And truthfully, I think we'll be a model for the nation going forward as far as interoperable talk groups that are encrypted go. We are also seeking outreach from other states on that, and one of the best points I've heard so far that in order to implement something like encryption, you have to have an understanding of how users operate, and for Iowa, that's going to vary tremendously from county to county. There's the old saying that there's 99 counties and 99 ways to do things, and I want to make sure that those are all incorporated into this. If you're curious about whether or not the time spent on this project is worth it, I have some usage statistics that were given to me by Mike Jeffries from Nebraska on their encrypted radio traffic for perspective. In July, they had about 575,000 push-to-talks. About 17.5% of those were encrypted. And as far as system time, they had about 860 hours of actual talk time. Keep in mind that a lot of these push-to-talks are 5 seconds in length or so. And it was about 12.5%. So there's a considerable amount of time that can be taken up by encryption. So I think it is something that's worth investigating. My outreach to county sheriff's offices, municipal police and fire departments, 911 coordinators is ongoing. I'm sitting down with them one by one, county by county, and asking them what their needs consist of and assisting them in any way I can to facilitate interoperable communications. For every county, they have a different need set, and I've found that. I'm checking to see if they have had questions on Isicsb that they haven't been able to ask yet, FirstNet, and then any other items. From what I've heard, I think this highlights some of the need to have a semi-standardized RFP template that's developed at a very high level like FPIC, where a lot of the technical needs are sorted out, and then a county can go through a checklist and say, we need this, we need this, we need this. Let's throw it in our RFP so we know exactly what we're getting. So that way they can take the information from a trusted, unbiased source like SafeCom, FPIC, or NICSWIC, and then use that for their RFP. Going forward, I also did some work on the WISE pilot report this month. That has been completed and turned into the Commissioner's office at DPS, and we'll see where it goes from there. But from what I've seen, there's a lot of potential there to enhance school safety and interoperable communications at all the ICN connected schools across the state. So with that, I will conclude my remarks and take any questions.
I have one for you. The Security Committee, is that a subcommittee of any of our standing committees, or are you creating a new standing committee? Or
What I will, that's something that I haven't necessarily sorted out yet. It'll probably end up being a subcommittee of the Technology Committee, or we could keep it as an independent task force if the chair would prefer.
If you do a standing committee, it has to be chaired by a board member, just a heads up on that.
So
you do a subcommittee, that's okay to chair it by another entity, but it still has to roll through a committee of some type for any approval. Okay.
And any findings from the committee will go through the appropriate Technology Committee and Governance Committee, and then up to the board for approval.
I understand what the ISSI is, but I never can remember what does ISSI stand for, if you wouldn't mind telling me again.
It's inter-subsystem standard interface, yes. So yeah. It's one of those things, Chair Hagan, where I've been looking at this for so long, the acronym takes over the name. So
Tom, I've got a quick comment. Being relatively new to the board, I certainly was prepared to defer to the expertise of technology and the CIO and others on the expertise of the ISSI. And I think you being new in your position would have been perhaps reasonable to rely on the report provided by Swick Allen that had been prepared before you. And although I wasn't part of the search process that brought you to us, I've been very impressed in the level of knowledge and the depth of these issues that you seem to have quickly gained a masterful, or at least a knowledgeable level of when we in this room ask you to, or other stakeholders have asked about ISSI. Again, you could have perhaps deferred or punted or looked to other resources, and it seems that you have pursued every lead that you've had an opportunity to help bring more information to us, the non-technical folks in the room, and for that I say thanks and job well done.
Thank you.
Also, I appreciate the outreach you're doing to the counties. If you're planning on doing a 99 county tour, that's awesome. It's a lot of work, but it's well worth it because we have to get the questions answered for the interop piece and how this is all going to shake out. Not operations, interoperations, and that's your job, and you do well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to Blake. Are you going to give both? Okay.
Today at the 911 Council meeting, the Council approved EIS grants for a total of $104,329. Also, I will show a map of where text to 911 is now available. You'll notice that the map is definitely becoming more colorful, which is good. In a second. I promise there's a map. So the green colors indicate that text 911 is available, and the same caveat from last month, they may be in various stages of testing. We confirmed the connectivity with Verizon and then continue to work through with the different wireless providers. So some of them are all the way complete with AT&T, Sprint, US Cellular, you name it. Others have just confirmed the connectivity with Verizon and are in the process of working through that process. Another thing that I need to bring to your attention in case it comes across your desk or in case you see it, Nebraska had some high-profile misroutes along the Nebraska-Iowa border of 911 calls. Nebraska Public Utilities Commission contracted with a vendor to help them do a study on what those issues were and how they could be fixed. The vendor conducted some test calls along the Nebraska-Iowa border. They were all conducted on the Nebraska side, but some of those did route incorrectly into Iowa. Some of them were not transferred appropriately from one side to the other. So I've been working with Nebraska, with my counterpart, with the vendor, and with the 5 PSAPs that border Nebraska to look at what can be done, look at implementing the recommendations from the vendor. Some of those were changing the sector of the cell phone tower, but some of them were also looking at training and transfer policies and how the system was built and make sure it appropriately set up to transfer. So looking at kind of the full gauntlet of the issues there. So again, just wanted to make you aware of that. Another kind of higher level item to make you aware of, Kerry's Law is the name of a piece of legislation right now that's been passed by both sides of Congress, but the language is a little bit different, so they have to go mirror up the language. Kerry's Law basically mandates that multi-line telephone systems, so businesses, hotels, even some PSAPs, that you no longer have to dial 9 to get out before reaching 911. So it sounds like that will go through at the federal level, which obviously would become law at the state level as well. So expect that to pass. I don't think we'll have to do anything necessarily with 34A, the governing code for 911 in Iowa, but we will probably be busy making those type of businesses and hotels aware that that's the new federal law. So it's a good piece of legislation. It was named after a young lady who tried to call 911 as her parents were being assaulted and couldn't get out because she didn't know she had to dial 911. So finally, yesterday, Iowa Utilities Board passed deregulated landline traffic. Still in contact with IUB to see exactly what that means and how it relates to 911. So definitely more to follow on that. But again, you will probably see that in the news today. So wanted to make you aware that it did come up briefly at the 911 Council, but definitely more to follow. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the user group committee. Is Andy on the phone?
Yes, I am. Thank you. User Group Committee met July 20th. We're seeing a decline in the activity of the regional interoperable committees, with the exception of right now RIC 2 seems to be sustaining and growing. The rest of them have poor attendance. And as we talked about this during the meeting, it seems since Helen Trajanovich and John Harris have been reassigned, that's made a significant impact. Obviously, there's things being done at the board level with Ethan stepping in and doing some things right now, so we appreciate all the work that he's doing to help support our RICs. But that's one of the issues that we're definitely going to have to step forward and see that we're going to find some sort of solution with FirstNet. Right on the, essentially right on that, since the governor opted in, there's some decisions that are going to have to be made locally, and to get that input, we're going to have to use those regional interoperable committees as much as possible. We had a lengthy discussion about sustainability and the future of Isicsb as far as what we're going to need for revenue sources, things like that, and just how that's kind of one of the things that I've asked us to maybe take a look at is what are we going to do about future maintenance, expansion, possibly staffing issues, so that we don't run into these areas as people get reassigned, because there's a lot of heavy lifting going on right now, and all the help that we definitely need. We reviewed 2 applications that's coming up later in the agenda from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Iowa Air National Guard 185th Air Refueling Wing. During the discussion about the 185th, the person that had applied was a technician, so we weren't comfortable with just this one person. person being the applicant. So we did require a letter of support, or at least knowledge of that that this airman was applying on behalf of the 185th. We did receive that, and obviously that's why we're going to be hopefully voting to approve as well today. But it led to the question that which levels of authority may act on behalf of an agency or entity. So that's something that we're going to continue to talk about at the UGC. We briefly discussed things like the Standards Committee, that Jason Hoffman is our representative on that. Limited discussions about approved device lists, talk groups, user application assistance, things like that. With that, if there's no questions, I'll end my report.
Okay, Andy. Let's move on to finance. Nikki, are you on the phone today? Nikki Whitaker, the vice chair of the finance, are you on the phone today?
Yes, I am on the phone.
Okay, go ahead with your report. In Chair Grosker's absence, will you please give the Finance Committee update?
Yes. We met on the 4th of August. What we're seeing is a lot of stability currently with the financial statements. The board's general fund account has $158,930 available. The grant has $384,483 remaining in the grant. We are seeing some changes due to the reassignment of ICN staff, so the Finance Committee is going to be looking at that within the next months to assess the impact of that and how that will impact our use of the grant funds for the remainder of the term. That's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Nikki? Okay, Nikki, thank you. Let's move on to governance. Who is filling in for, are you Dave? Okay.
Yep. Dave Ness, and Vice Chair of the Governance, when we met on via conference call on Monday the 7th and reviewed 3 policies, the waivers and variances and waivers policy. We had a few minor tweaks. In the first sentence, we specified that the granting of such can be temporary or permanent. Thought clarification may be helpful there, and that flexibility. And then we also, there was previously some language that on page 2 that allowed for experts to weigh in, but it was not specified how that would be handled. And we added language that allowed that to be incorporated via the standards coordinator, so that there wasn't a requirement that a variance that may be timely or have a sense of urgency, that there would be a requirement for a board meeting to come together and approve, and then perhaps another board meeting to get people into place and so forth. So just for the efficiency, we added that to the standards coordinator's role. And then finally, there was a concern in the cost portion, and this runs across all 3 of these policies. There's the last portion of these policies says exact costs are unknown at this point, but potential costs could include ... So there was some concern that the exact costs may mean to the user or to the applicant seeking the variance or waiver, and we specified that the exact cost to the Isicsb, just to make it clear if there was any doubt that those costs would not be borne by the applicant. So those are the 3 minor revisions we suggested for the variance and waivers, and with that, we would be recommending approval. I don't know if you want to take action on that, or if you want me to run through the additional 2.
I think we could probably do it at the new business section, as long as you want to run through them, and then we'll vote on them.
Sounds good. The system logging and naming, I think the only revision to that was the cost thing. As previously discussed, we added the words the Isicsb, so the exact cost to the Isicsb are unknown. not to the other users. And then there was slight discussion. We didn't necessarily come to a resolution on the final one, which was the maintenance of the alias list. Near the bottom, there's a bullet about liabilities that said the standards working group acknowledges normal liabilities as they relate to the employee-employer relationship as recognized by the Iowa Code. And there was a mention by one of the committee, and I think there was general agreement that we were just concerned. We wanted to emphasize the importance of this alias list and make sure that that language was as strong as it needs to be. The access to this alias list is critically important to the system, and if that language is sufficient to protect that, wonderful. If it needed to be strengthened, but I think that perhaps has gone to the AG's office, and the fact that it hasn't changed makes me think that they must be comfortable with that. But those were our discussions about the three. Generally speaking, though, we were very pleased with the level of detail and comprehensive nature of these three, and we were happy to forward them to the full board for consideration.
Okay. Any questions for governance? All right, you'll be busy.
Thank you.
Operations, Deb, are you on the phone? Deb Chair Cravel?
Yes, I am. I want to quick first apologize for any pounding you may hear in the background. A new roof is being installed here at our station, so hopefully that won't interfere. The Operations Committee conducted a phone conference on July 19th, and we used this call to establish some goals and an action plan for our committee moving forward. Arlene Torres and April of the OEC joined Swick Myers and 6 of our committee members in trying to establish those goals. And our committee had been struggling with what exactly our expectations of our committee were from the Isicsb board. And the question of how we can do better serve the board was really an underlying reservation and uncertainty among all of us. So the committee came up with our 3 goals. Number 1 was at the end of 5 years, 95% of all dispatch centers in the state will have access to Isicsb. Number 2, Operations Committee will review the Isicsb draft policies and make recommendations to the Standards Working Group. And number 3, we are to align and update legacy communication plans and include system failures. So we established metrics for success on each of those objectives and an action plan to assist in meeting those goals. We also had the technology chair, Patrick Updike, joined us to ask our committee to review the policy 2014-03 regarding encryption. As you heard earlier in this meeting from Swick Myers, the encryption portion really needs to be investigated. We've heard from some of the users that this really needs to be looked at and maybe changed in that policy. So we will be, at our next meeting next week, we will be discussing the possibility to amend this policy in some way or maybe split the policy. And reasons for this discussion is in reaction to the user's needs. So that's the end of my report, if I don't have any questions.
Deb, this is Tom. I really appreciate you setting your 3 goals. I think that's great that you have a vision. As a reminder, Chris and I, the SWIC, will be coming out around the 1st of September to all committees to share your vision and our vision is what you need to do in the next year, even reference the platform and start when it gets operational next fall. So we'll be starting that. Hopefully when the SCIP report is complete, we'll have that in hand for you also. So my goal is that every committee has a copy of their SCIP report, and every committee has a vision and goal of what their specific duties are and what needs to be done in certain time periods. But I'm really excited to hear that you've got the 3 major goals defined and what your plan on is moving forward. Appreciate that.
Thank you. We're excited.
Very important committee. You're all important, but they're very important. All right. Let's move on to if the outreach committee has anything. I know Sean is not here. He's in Puerto Rico for some reason. He thinks he needed to go. But go ahead.
Well, my report's very short then.
Okay.
We had our conference call on the 24th of July, and Sean was on and gave us a great report on what's been going on with outreach. Our next meeting will be the 28th, and Arlene will be on with us, webinar, so that we can get our skip all figured out.
Sounds like she's been very helpful.
Sounds good from what I'm hearing, yeah, as reports go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's my report.
Okay. Well, let's move on to training.
The training committee had our conference call on July 19th. I just want to point out a couple of things. We talked about the class, the COMT class that we had. It was held last week. It went very, very well. Kudos to Rob Hedgepath and Wally Walzer. That was the first time that they trained the class. I hear that it went awesome. I was not able to attend, but it did go very well, so we were pleased about that. We, as a group, talked about developing training and education, possibly program outreach for LMR and FirstNet once they really get rolling, how we're going to do that to get that out to the public so that they can use it together, maybe come up with some kind of training. We talked about, and it will be under new business, we talked about credentialing a new COMT, Josh Humphrey. We started talking about an incident tactical dispatch training class. I did have a subsequent meeting. We did set the date for that. The date will be November 13th through the 16th, and it will be held at DPS headquarters. We're going to go ahead and put information out about that at this week. And then we worked mostly with Arlene, and we worked on developing our goals and objectives and our action plan for the training committee as a whole. And our next meeting will take place on August 16th via conference call.
Very good. Okay, technology. Chair Updike, are you still on the phone with us?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
On the 20th of July, we had our conference call to get our SCIP goals, metrics, objectives, action plans for the technology committee established. It's somewhat lengthy. I'd be more than happy to read it to you, but it might take up a bunch of time. So if you'd like to see that, I'll be more than happy to email it to you if you'd like to read through that. But that was an accomplishment for us this month. Shortly after the last meeting, I contacted Eric Nevins with regards to the low-power channels. We did find an existing FRN license, which is tied to the trailers, the STRs. So we're working on getting those frequencies set up. I know Eric was on vacation or had some other business, so there was a little bit of a delay there, but we're working on that. Moving on to the encryption policy 2014-03. Still waiting for input from operations, as you heard Deb say. Once I have gathered that information from her group and some information from governance, then we'll try to go through this all again. I'm hoping that this doesn't go stale and that we can keep moving forward with this and get this wrapped up. The meetings, the conference calls for the technology committee were July 27th and August 1st. Most of that time was spent on the ISSI. Swick Myers has obviously gone through that in detail, and once we get to the other part of our agenda here, we can go into further detail. But for right now, that's the technology committee update for this month.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Okay, let's move on to other reports. I'm going to open up to the board members. Any information you'd like to share amongst us board members, including people on the phone if you have something? I do have one thing in regards to the Connected Nation contract. As you know, you've approved up to a certain amount, which I negotiated with Connected Nation, up to a certain amount, which we approved. When we went to sign a contract, DAS says we can't operate off that current contract number because we renewed it too many times or to the maximum of times. So we're just going to simply move it to another contract number because Connected Nation has a master contract with the state. I just want eyes wide open to the board that Sean Wagner is still employed with us. We're just operating off a different contract number which is actually a higher rate, but that's okay because we'll just limit the number of hours so we still don't go over what we've approved. So we'll actually probably end up attaching an amendment to the price that we agreed with our contract with Connected Nation and attach that to the master. So it's just a matter of paperwork shuffling. Just want eyes wide open on that. That's what's occurring. He's on vacation right now, and so it should work out actually fairly well. We'll get it done here through legal and DPS. So that was eyes wide open on that. Anything else anybody wants to share? We're moving right along here. Okay. Motorola, Melvin, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
All right, so in looking at the overall schedule, I'm following the same format I normally use. We've had movement. All of them has been positive with the exception of Region 1. Last month when I reported, we were at 67% for Region 1. Region 1 is moving back to 65%. And the reason for that is because we've had a site that was rejected, and we have to restart the process for that. So because of that, we're falling back on Region 1. For Region 2, we have another 4 percentage points, so we went from 67 to 71%, which is a good thing. Region 3, we also have up at 4 points from 62 to 66%. In Region 4, we went from 72 to 76%, so that's another uptick of 4 percentage points. And Region 5 has been the one that's lagging behind from 55 to 56%. The major reason why Region 5 is behind when compared to all the others, and by the way, Region 6 is at 71%, is because we have the majority of the sites, we have lease sites in the system design, and the majority of those lease sites fall into that, and we haven't hit the trigger on those yet. So we're holding those for the time being until we make sure that all the other surrounding connecting sites are completely locked, and we're good with those. So overall, the project is at 67%. I would have liked to see that a little bit higher than that, somewhere between, around the 70 percentage point. But I think there's other issues that we are starting to have a forward movement on, which is overall good. So as I look at the activities right now, the big focus is, and should be no surprise, we're focusing on the state fair. We want to make sure that operations are good for the state fair. So again, we enabled certain things, and we've been working with DPS to make sure that things are operational in the way they want to use them. We also are planning for some reconfigurations of some of the sites that we have in the Des Moines area, and we're going to be waiting for that until the state fair is over. Once the state fair is over, then again, because DPS is using the system, we want to make sure that we coordinate with DPS so that we can deal with the service impact of taking those sites out of the air so we can do some reconfiguration work. Right now we have about 50 sites that are active, so that's definitely a lot of work going on throughout the state. We also have microwave dish installations that continue to happen. So the microwave supports the transport network, so it's like a two-layer thing. So we have all the civil work being done. Once the towers are completed, then we have a different team, which is the team that's focusing on the microwaves. They're going throughout the site and installing the dishes as we move forward. Last time I mentioned that we had some issues with getting power to sites. I think we've resolved these are mainly administrative in nature. So I think we've moved forward that, and there's paperwork that's being submitted and approved for power to the sites. The power companies have a backlog, so they have, in addition to the state system, right, they got work to do elsewhere as well. So we're working on getting on each of the power providers' queue for getting power to the sites. As I mentioned, we had last time we had about 20 sites that are ready for this, and so we're getting on that queue. And again, by the end of this quarter, we'll have the remaining sites. So we're expecting civil site completion certifications with the state in the near future. Basically, what that means is that the sites are done, and that means the shelters, the generators, the towers, all that work has been done, and we'll be visiting the sites with representatives from the state so that we can certify that the sites are completed and we can continue moving forward. One of the other things is that we had some internal processes that are state-specific that were taking place, and I believe that continues, and these are required to allow Motorola to lock in the DNR sites. This is some processes between DPS and DNR to allow that to move forward. So we're doing some things on our side in parallel, but there's also some paperwork and administrative stuff that needs to happen on the state side as well. So I had mentioned this before, so this is a little bit of an update. We had 2 sites that were rejected by local boards. One of them, we found a workaround for one, and we proceeded forward, but the downside is that it reset the timeline for that particular site. For the other one, we're currently looking at some options, and in order to protect the critical, the timeline, we may choose to forego that particular site or the county altogether in order to protect the timeline. As we look at the overall project plan, that particular site has become the critical path, so we're looking at different options to see what we can do to keep things moving. We continue to work with the lease sites, and we don't have them locked down per se, but we have been working with them in terms of the placement of the equipment in the sites, and that has to do with making sure that we address the adjacent sites that connect to the lease site. So when there's changes on either end, we have to address those changes as well on the lease sites. And so we've gone through several cycles with moving the dishes up and down and making sure that all the math, works out correctly in terms of loading analysis and all that kind of stuff. From there, it's all the little loose ends, so we're working on all these things at the same time, but we're making progress and we're moving forward. One thing I want to mention was that, and I thought perhaps it was worth mentioning here, I know that I mentioned last time that Dallas County had transitioned their operations into Isicsb, and I believe that not too long after they transitioned, they had a situation where they actually had to use a system. And if Terry McClanahan is there, I had asked him if he is able to talk a little bit about that as a way of describing the differences, and this is more of a tip of the iceberg as we move forward.
He is here.
Dallas County law enforcement moved over to the new system, the Dallas County Isicsb system, on July 12th. And we did this at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And lo and behold, about 2:12 that afternoon, we had the report of a missing child who had been missing for well over an hour already. And so, in the old system, just a few hours earlier, we would have had multiple agencies showing up with various different radio systems, as we're all aware. We had state agencies, multiple state agencies show up. We had county conservation. We had our agency showed up with multiple police departments, fire departments. Everybody normally would have been on totally different radio systems. And in this beheld, instead of having to have a incident commander with 2 or 3 different radios or 2 or 3 different people from various agencies to relay information for our search, our lieutenant was able to, everybody switched over to an FTAC, or excuse me, a law enforcement TAC, handed radios to agencies that didn't have our system, and everything went through one radio, through one incident commander, and it just clicked. And this is what we've been after for years. And so our portables worked no matter where we were. We've yet to find any place in the county, inside of a building or anything, that doesn't work in this new system. It's just phenomenal. And so for us, it's a success. We've had 3 other instances within the next 48 hours of implementing this, high-risk arrests and high-risk entries. And where we're able to go into buildings, use portables, our teams are able to go in there with a lot more capability for communications. So we're very happy with our system.
Nice to hear.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Barry. So that was, I had asked them to talk a little bit about that because, again, this is really just represents the tip of the capabilities. I think as we move forward, I had mentioned in our last board meeting that I wanted to show an active call between all the systems or agencies that are connected right now throughout the state. And I think that I'm holding back on that because I want to make sure that folks understand how to do this. It's relatively straightforward, but it's new, right? And so we want to make sure that the dispatch agencies really realize and understand how they can have a connection to a much broader audience in terms of state agencies or other agencies that they need to interoperate with. So while it's straightforward, it's something new, so we want to make sure that folks are comfortable doing that before we show it out. But that's all I had. Any questions?
Questions for Melvin? Great, thanks, Melvin.
Okay.
Jim?
Good morning. Have just a couple of quick topics I wanted to review with the board. The first printed, Ethan provided a copy of a recently released 3 August Federal Communications Commission notice of inquiry in which the commission is exploring the potential for sharing existing microwave bands with other users as we look to more and more spectrum needs for broadband. The commission is exploring the potential to allow unlicensed or licensed operations concurrently in the bands between 3.7 and 24 gigahertz. Many agency microwave systems, both public safety, private, and government, operate in those bands. And this has become a topic of at least something you should keep your eye on. If your agency uses microwave to either control a wide area network or synchronize a simulcast network, you may want to be aware of what's going on and potentially offer comments in response to this commission notice of inquiry as we look to using a deregulated environment such as unlicensed activity in that band if it causes interference. A couple of the senior technicians that I've spoken with on this call it like trying to solve the game of whack-a-mole. I've got interference, I need to find it, it's gone. Oh, it's over here, it's over there. And of course, we're going to see higher and higher and higher incidences of interference as the commission moves away from a highly regulated to a more flexible, unregulated status. But I would urge you to consider filing comments in this if this is of interest to your agency. Potential words that get people's attention with the FCC include safety of life and property. That's probably all I can say without lobbying, but be aware that that NOI is on the street and the future of shared spectrum may be a challenge to you. Yes, Chris.
Jim, is there a document out there that specifically labels which bands and which frequencies are up for this deregulation?
No, it's a very broad inquiry. It just specifies that set of frequencies from 3.7 to 24 gigahertz. That includes a lot of medium and short haul microwave, so be advised.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ethan, if you can put up, I had a couple of slides I wanted to share with you. The first one is taken from a briefing I attended recently in another state. And I call this one to your attention because this particular entity has a mature, wide area, multi-band, multi-state communications network, and they are now into what we call the sustainment mode. We're looking at technology refresh. I'm saving the 34 slides, but I clipped one out that I think is a good roadmap for you. Notice the discussion of where they are going with their next generation of subscribers. Replacement requirements identify P25 Phase 2 encrypted AES multi-key with OTAR. Does that sound familiar to you with the Isicsb platform? Once again, it's just a pulse check to say you may be on the right path. Every now and then it's good to hear that you're not alone in the dark. The other thing is this particular entity is looking at strategies for how to finance what is believed to be about a $220 million regional infrastructure. They're looking at subscribers that could be centrally maintained under a long-term lease, or purchased outright and interagency MOAs established for maintenance. So just know there's people out there. That's my job to connect the dots and share this information. But I thought this was a pretty good one, just that one clip to say, oh, by the way, what I'm hearing in Iowa is being reflected and echoed in other parts of the U.S. The next 4 slides, Ethan, if you'll pop up the first one, not wanting to take you too deep into the world of national incident management systems and the national response framework and incident command, but for anybody who knows anything about the communications unit, this first slide describes where we are today. If you notice in the right-hand side, under the COM-L and COM-T, we sort of put IT out here to the side. And we talk about, really, if you think about the COM-L and COM-T curriculum today, it's adapted to the all hazards environment from the National Wildfire Coordinating Group models. So they're very closely aligned. But as today, we think of LMR and everything else that goes with it. Now the COM-L often is responsible for internet access, telephone access, health and welfare access. However, IT is identified as an IT support under a technical specialist. Next slide, please. Notionally, and OEC is leading a discussion at the national level on this. Do we create a new service branch within the communications unit that directly supports IT, specifically web apps and other things that are so critical today in managing an incident? So this is one of the things that's on the stage with SAFECOM and the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators, is understanding where the next generation of the communications unit will evolve to. And just as an example, next slide, please. This is what our bread and butter is today. We talk about what channels, what talk groups, how are they named, how do we manage, and the next slide will reflect where we think this will be in the future. Under the ICS 205, you will also be identifying assets by IP address, by functional attachment. These things happen today organically when we bring in that technical specialist, but a lot of this is in their head. It's not mapped, it's not well coordinated, so we're looking at this as a potential evolution of the communications unit to include those assets. Just for awareness only, this will take a couple of years. This has to go back through FEMA's National Integration Center. Changes to NIMS and ICS occur at a glacial pace. They happen, but it's hard to measure. The key is I don't want it to be a surprise to those of you who manage or work in this area that we're having this discussion. It's very interesting at the federal level. Does this all just really fall under IT and all comms should be under IT? Operationally, probably not. It should probably be under the logistics under communications, and then all the things that move and make this happen. Last thing I wanted to mention to you, and I also mentioned this to the 911 Council today, at a time of heightened international tension, and I don't think anybody in this room is immune to what's been talked about in the news, the potential for an incident involving a hostile foreign power with nuclear ambitions. Let's go back to our Cold War days and remember a little thing called electromagnetic pulse, EMP, which has the potential to not only affect the electric grid, but every single thing that is connected to a wire, whether it's a microwave system, a land mobile radio system, a communications network, and the internet. Let's hope we don't have to deal with that. But as communicators and public safety officials, I would ask you to recall your training. Let's go back to that acronym PACE. What's our primary, alternate, contingent, and emergency communication strategy? We should all have one, both professionally, operationally, and personally. But this would be a good time to rethink that, because when this fails, or when that doesn't work except in a tactical environment, remember, we have assets, we have capabilities that are off network that will work. So I would urge you to just think about that for a minute, refresh your memory on what do I do in a tactical operation? What do I do if the network isn't there? I hope we don't face that, and I don't want to be an alarmist or a warmonger, but the reality is we can't ignore it. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to old business. If Ann or Terry could come up, are they still here? Can you give just a quick update? I knew I threw a bunch of policies in just lately for you to edit to send to the committee.
Good morning. I will fill in. I know Terry had to run out. We are working on putting together the process by which we funnel and help out with the standards so that they can be put up to the different committee members. We have worked on and edited 3 that have already gone through one committee and are putting them back onto our Asana, which is our sort of clearinghouse that's online for everybody. And tomorrow, or we just made an appointment, him and I, to go through the prioritization and make sure we're putting the standards in the right format and getting them to you and the rest of the committee members.
So I threw probably at least 10 more in there for you.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right. Well, then I will look for those and we'll work on those.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Moving on in old business, ISSI report update. We've talked extensively with the SWIC report and Patrick. Do you want to elaborate any more, Patrick? Are you still on the phone?
Well, yep, I'm still here. Just real quickly, this document that was drawn up by Swick Allen and the OCIO, Von Waltrad, we handed this out to the technology committee members, and we had them go through this, and then we had very lengthy discussions over this. The end result is, and you've already heard Swick Myers talk about all of the potentials that come with using an ISSI. Doesn't make sense at this point to implement it, but it doesn't make sense to just throw it out completely. I think it still needs time to mature, and everybody within the technology committee agreed with that. There's too many variables right now that would limit its capability, and so the end result is the technology committee is really more apt to say that this should be held as a technical recommendation and not drafted as policy. we all accept the wording from the findings of this report, but really don't think that it needs to be nailed down as a policy. And so we have come up with a technical recommendation that I believe was handed out, printed out. It outlines some of those things. And I don't know if Swick Myers wants to expand on that anymore, but the Technology Committee would prefer to just leave this as a technical recommendation for the use of the ISSI on the Isicsb 25 system.
Okay. Any further?
I believe I sent the notes out on the thoughts of the Technology Committee and the aspects playing into that thought process yesterday. So I believe it's been in your possession for about 24 hours or so. It does go into detail about some of the other things we talked about. There's not much more to elaborate on aside from the fact that it's kind of a universal belief now that we need to wait for this technology to mature, and we need to wait for the standards to advance in a more cohesive and more rigid way in which they can be interpreted, as opposed to getting into the scenario where you may have rules that dictate that something has to have these items but doesn't dictate how they're deployed. There are other more robust standards out there that I think could be the model for that. And truthfully, I view this as an opportunity for the board to use its seat at TIA and TR8 to help this process advance further, so it does benefit the stakeholders in public safety in Iowa and across the country.
It's been an old business for 3 meetings now. I'd like to move it out of there. So either what are your plans here? That's to you, Patrick, as the chair.
Okay. I would like to personally make a motion that the board go ahead and accept the wording of the study conducted by Swick Allen and Mr. Von Wolfrad, but accept it as it is worded, but not be adopted as a policy, and leave it only as a technical recommendation that can be worked on later as the system matures.
So I hear that as a motion to accept the wording as is regarding the ISSI, the study as worded, but not as a policy. Is that correct?
And only as a technical recommendation.
And only as a technical recommendation. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Who was that? Okay, got a second. Further discussion?
Can we do a roll call, please?
Okay.
I would just have one thing that
Sure.
the only thing that concerns me about this is we're not hearing a lot from Motorola on this. And I think people outside would really like to hear what Motorola's take on this was, because obviously the switch was part of the original design, and it seems that, things have obviously changed, or maybe they didn't, I don't know, but just from the outside looking in, I just think we would be better served at some point to hear what Motorola has to say about this switch and how we got to where we are with it.
Okay. So I have a motion Patrick's motion. Let's go ahead and take a second on that. I have a second, and let's do a roll call on that, and then we'll see but you could add that, Sheriff, if you'd like, to have Motorola's input as part of the motion.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's appropriate there. Just a desire of mine is to hear from Motorola on this subject.
Chair, would it be appropriate just to have Melvin address that as part of his regularly scheduled appearance at our next board meeting, perhaps? Just kind of talk about how it was in initially, and now it's not part of the recommendation, so get us from point A to point B.
Right.
Okay. It may be appropriate, depending on how the vote goes, we'll do just that. We'll have Motorola come in and explain what now and what was this intended for. So I have a motion and a second. We've discussed it. I'll take a roll call.
Swearingen?
Aye.
Patrick Updike?
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm?
Aye.
Marty Smith?
Aye.
Tom Lampy?
Aye.
John Benson, Bob Van Wolfrat,
Aye.
Denise Pavlik. Andy Buffington,
Aye.
Ellen Hagan,
Aye.
Deb Krebel,
Aye.
David Ness,
Aye.
Jason Leonard, Rob Rotter,
I'm going to vote no just for now. Thanks.
Mike Casper, Carol Lund Smith,
Aye.
Larry Smith,
Aye.
Linda Frederickson, Kelly Grosskirth, it passed 13-1.
Okay, motion passes, and we will have Motorola come in during their regular report on the next meeting on what next, and since the board's made a decision not to use it at this time, so we'll definitely research that. Okay, let's move on to new business. System law, we got 3 policies here to approve by the Vice Chair of Governance. It's made it through the process to the full board now. I'll leave it up to you, Chair, or Vice Chair, if you want to. You've already explained what your edits are, okay? If you'd like to re-go over that, you can. Otherwise, unless the board has questions, we can go ahead and approve one at a time, if we'd like, or we can do them all at once.
I will, understanding that there can be discussion after the motion, I'd make a motion to approve the policy on system login naming maintenance.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the first policy listed under new business A, system login naming policy. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
Larry's a second. Further discussion on that policy? Roll call, please.
Jeff Swearingen.
Aye.
Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
Aye.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson. Bob Van Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik.
Aye.
Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Krebel. David Ness.
Aye.
Jason Leonard. Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper. Carol Lund Smith.
Aye.
Larry Smith.
Aye.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth. All in favor.
Okay, motion passes. Next.
Make a similar motion for the policy of maintenance of names and alias.
We have a motion to approve policy under new business C, maintenance of names and aliases. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by the sheriff. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Jeff Swearingen.
Aye.
Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm. Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson. Bob Van Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik. Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Krebel.
Aye.
David Ness.
Aye.
Jason Leonard. Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper. Carol Lund Smith.
Aye.
Larry Smith.
Aye.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grosskirth. All in favor.
Okay, motion passes. Get one more.
Mr. Chair, on behalf of the governance, and make a motion to approve the variance and waivers, number B on the agenda.
Okay, a motion under new business B, variances and waivers policy approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jeff. Further discussion? Roll call.
Aye. Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
Aye.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson. Bob Van Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik.
Aye.
Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Crubble.
Aye.
David Ness.
Aye.
Jason Leonard. Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper. Carol Lund Smith.
Aye.
Larry Smith.
Aye.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grassgirth. All in favor.
Okay, motion passes. Move on to Josh Humphrey. If you'd come to the front. Credentialing. Josh, I have a certificate of recognition for you here today. This is a certificate to award Josh Humphrey for completing all requirements of the Isicsb Communications Credentialing Program and is entitled to be recognized and credentialed in the state of Iowa for the following position: Communications Leader, ComL. Awarded this 10th day of August of 2017. It's signed by myself and the Vice Chair. And thank you. Did you want a picture? Okay, we have one item up left for business is the approval of the applications for the Iowa Air National Guard 185th Air Fueling Wing and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources access to Isicsb. I'll turn that back over to Chair Buffington.
The User Group Committee has reviewed and considered both applications of the Iowa Air National Guard 185th Air Refueling Wing. Again, we received the document that we required from command of the applicant supporting the application, as well as the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. So with that, I would make a motion to approve the Iowa Air National Guard 185th Air Refueling Wing access to Isicsb.
We have a motion on the floor to approve Iowa Air National Guard 185th Air Refueling Wing to access Isicsb. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
Second by Larry Smith.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
Aye.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson. Bob Van Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik.
Aye.
Andy Buffington.
Aye.
Ellen Hagan.
Aye.
Deb Crubble.
Aye.
David Ness.
Aye.
Jason Leonard. Rob Rotter.
Aye.
Mike Casper. Carol Lund Smith.
Aye.
Larry Smith.
Aye.
Linda Frederickson. Kelly Grassgirth. All in favor.
Okay, motion passes. Back to you, Andy.
Okay, the User Group Committee recommends and makes a motion to approve the Iowa Department of Natural Resources access to Isicsb.
Motion on the floor for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources access to Isicsb. Do I have a second? Second, Jeff Sunholm. Further discussion? One more roll call.
Jeff Swearengin. Abstain. Patrick Updike.
Aye.
Jeff Sunholm.
Aye.
Marty Smith.
Aye.
Tom Lampy.
Aye.
John Benson. Bob Van Wolfrat.
Aye.
Denise Pavlik,
Aye.
Andy Buffington,
Aye.
Ellen Hagan,
Aye.
Deb Krebel,
Aye.
David Ness,
Aye.
Jason Leonard, Rob Rotter,
Aye.
Mike Casper, Carol Lund Smith,
Aye.
Larry Smith,
Aye.
Linda Frederickson, Kelly Grosskirth, (13 in favor and 1 abstain).
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, we're to the end of the meeting. We're in the public comment phase. If anybody would like to come address the board, you may do that this time. Okay. I have a motion for adjournment. Hey, Jeff?
Second.
Second, the sheriff? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Four members present.
Ryan, any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes, Your Honor.
Okay, can I get a motion?
Move approval of the agenda as distributed.
All right, please vote.
4 yes.
All right, item 2 is citizens forum, which is the time for anyone in the audience who would like to address the city council on any items that are not part of public hearings, item 6, or new business, item 7. All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to council and mayor reports. Jim?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right, Kevin?
Nothing this time, Your Honor.
Russ?
Nothing at this time.
Rick?
Quickly, Public Service Committee meeting met last Monday, just FYI. Bear with me. Just FYI for residents, there's a DLT survey out there regarding